tests in advance of the meeting. Welcome to our witnesses that are here with us today. Just a very quick prompt that should you be using the earpiece and it's plugged in but not on your ear, if you can just make sure it's placed on the sticker in front of you. If it's not plugged in, nothing to worry about. Colleagues, we're going to be continuing with our Defense Industrial Strategy meeting today, following which you are aware we will have a 1064 conversation that will occur immediately following the conclusion of the second hour of today's Defense Industrial Strategy meeting. We've got two witnesses with us for the first hour here. So I would like to first welcome from Aerospace Industries Association of Canada, Mike Mueller, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer. And from the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, Kristen Ciafarani, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to you both. You will have upwards of 5 minutes. We've got a pretty strict timeline today, so I'll give you a little wave when you're getting close, but if you had rehearsed marks that went significantly over 5 minutes, I might have to give you a little bit of a gentle cutoff, so I'll apologize in advance for that. Following that, there'll be rounds of questions pre-allotted based on a particular proportion of the represented political parties at the table here. If you have questions at any time, feel free to let us know. Mr. Mueller, we'll begin with upwards of 5 minutes to you for introductory remarks. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm here representing Canada's aerospace sector, a strategic industry and national asset, with world-class companies of all sizes in every region of the country. For more than a century, aerospace has been a cornerstone of our national defense and a driver of economic growth. We have consistently delivered the capabilities and services our armed forces depend on, while supporting hundreds of thousands of Canadian workers across the country. We have been calling for an industrial strategy for a number of years. We have been encouraged to see the commitments from Prime Minister Carney and the federal government, and it's good to see all parties supporting increased defense spending. This is and needs to remain a nonpartisan issue. With Parliament now back in session, this is Canada's moment to turn commitment into action, and action will deliver long-term industrial strength and security. The choices we make now will determine whether we seize this opportunity to build up the defense industrial base and provide the capabilities our armed forces need to protect Canadians and our sovereignty. With the federal government focused on defense and significant new spending commitments, 2% of GDP this year, 5% by 2035, we are on the cusp of a generational opportunity. A strong industrial base isn't just about jobs and growth, it's also about providing our armed forces with what they need. It's about ensuring Canada has the autonomy and a capability to deter threats and defend our way of life. A strong industrial base guided by a strong industrial strategy is key to deterrence for our armed forces and ensuring we are, as the government says, building the strongest economy in the G7. This is something Canada has been missing and cannot afford further delays. The forthcoming Defence Industrial Strategy must flow from Canada's National Security Strategy, acting as a roadmap to inform and guide the new Defence Investment Agency and ensure investments are made in a way that develops desired domestic capabilities and meets long-term priorities for both defense and the economy. The recent announcement for a Defence Investment Agency is a welcome step towards clarity and accountability, but the new agency alone won't deliver the capabilities Canada's armed forces need while building our industrial base without that industrial strategy. For industry to be a true partner for the government and our armed forces to help achieve our collective goals for defense, we need a clear demand signal that translates into commitments through a defense industrial strategy, including the capabilities and capacities we need in Canada. To quote the former NATO Secretary General, without industry, there is no defense. Industry is ready to step up to the plate and deliver timely, relevant capabilities. So I am pleased to see the committee playing a role in this important work. If effective defense procurement is to succeed, it must embrace a culture shift and focus on outcomes that strengthen Canada's security and competitiveness. In order to achieve this, we require a system that is rooted in early, formal, and ongoing engagement and collaboration between the government, CAF, and industry, ensuring strong engagement that enhances readiness, strengthens the industrial base, and creates high-value jobs right across this country. The strength of Canada's defence industrial base will also depend on a strong civil sector. Canada's aerospace ecosystem is deeply integrated. Dual-use technologies, exports, innovation all flow across civil and defence lines. A strong industrial base is critical to equip, upgrade, and maintain CAF requirements. That's why a broader aerospace industrial strategy to complement the defence industrial strategy is essential. I would humbly suggest that as one of the few countries that can design, manufacture, certify, and maintain aircraft from tail to nose, that aerospace be identified as a sovereign capability. The world wants what Canada already has. We need to ensure we are leveraging our capability for the benefit of Canada and our economy. That's why AIC continues to call for a defense industrial strategy, procurement reform and culture change, and an aerospace industrial strategy. This will help secure our long-term strength and competitiveness. Canada's aerospace sector stands ready to work with government, the CAF, and Parliament to turn those commitments into action. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mueller. Ms. Cianfrani, upwards of 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. The Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, which I lead, represents over 1,000 firms that make up Canada's defence and national security industrial base. The government's commitment to establish a defence industrial strategy, the DIS, is the right course of action at this historic time. This is overdue given the threats to Canada's territorial sovereignty. The government's investment of over $9 billion this fiscal year to get Canada to the NATO 2% of GDP requirement, plus the commitment to achieve 3.5% within the next decade, risks being squandered without an underpinning strategy. Canada has not had a DIS in living memory. This is one of the sharp distinctions between us and our closest allies. Both the UK and Australia have had defence industrial strategies for decades and are constantly adjusting them in partnership with their domestic industries to meet evolving national defence and domestic economic objectives. This initiative is a very big deal for Canada, and we need to get it right. The leading expertise on the Canadian Defence Industrial Base and its technologies and services, as well as the motivations to incent business leaders to invest in our future, resides within companies. To date, CADSI has not seen a fulsome draft document in written format that describes the strategy's objectives, its tools, instruments, and frameworks, and what capabilities the strategy intends to sustain, grow, and create in Canada. We would expect to be able to review and provide feedback on a document that holds such transformational power, as is common practice in other nations. Instead, we've been asked in a non-structured way for inputs on various elements or concepts that may or may not find their way into the DIS. The simplest way to put it is this: we've seen some of the ingredients, but we haven't seen the cake. If Canada's DIS is to deliver the outcomes the Prime Minister has articulated, it'll need to be adjusted over time with recurring industry input. This is why we've recommended the establishment of a Defence Industry Ministerial Forum where executives from Canadian defence firms would meet with the Minister of National Defence and the Minister of Industry on a regular basis to discuss and resolve major impediments and map out and grow the industry to meet the needs of the government and the Canadian Armed Forces. Any good strategy pursues clear objectives. For the DIS, those objectives must be aimed at enhancing Canadian sovereignty, independence of action, and economic health. As the Prime Minister said in his speech at the University of Toronto this past June, a strong economy is foundational to national defence and security. That basic point should guide this strategy. Another core objective must be the health, growth, and resilience of the Canadian defence industrial base. More than a decade ago, a previous government had an initiative to improve economic outcomes from defence procurements. They set an explicit target to leverage defence procurement and grow the defence industrial base by over 40% over a decade, set at a time of zero growth in the defence budget. That target, which was met, is far too modest given the massive increase in defence spending and the Prime Minister's ambition to get as much as possible out of that spending for the Canadian economy. We suggest a growth target of 100% over 10 years. One foundational issue I know has been tricky for the people working on the DIS is the concept of sovereign capabilities. This is the idea that Canada will decide on a set of defence and national security capabilities that it will have some control over or be able to supply independently. We wouldn't need to rely on another country to deliver them in an emergency or otherwise. There could be services and technologies we know Canadian firms are good at producing now or that we need more control over. This list will evolve over time. To conclude, I want to be blunt about something that some find controversial. Any meaningful Canadian DIS must give procurement preference to Canadian firms that produce or could produce what the CAF and other national security agencies need. It's that simple. This means that it is integral to and informs the work of the Defence Investment Agency. The government needs the mindset and the tools to operate on that basis. And if the Defence Industrial Strategy does not embody that philosophy, I don't think it will meet the Prime Minister's ambitions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much both for your introductory remarks. Madame Dancho, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of the witnesses for being here. It's excellent to have both of your informed expertise at this important study. And I think you were saying actually a lot of the similar things, which is really important in crafting the recommendations that we will make to government. And I think we all share the concerns of the challenges that we've seen in our armed forces in procurement and many others in the last decade. And I know as a patriotic Canadian, hearing our allies call us freeloaders and the allied defense is very hard to hear, and I think we all agree we need to change that internationally. And certainly at home, I'm very happy to see that Canadians are putting sovereignty as a top issue for them, probably since the first time since the Cold War era. So this is good news on that front, that Canadians are putting that forward as a main issue. So I did want to ask you about, you both mentioned the importance of sovereign capabilities, and we've had some challenges in this area over the last number of years. So I'll first focus on aerospace, and then we'll go generally. In aerospace, of course, we have a large sector in Winnipeg that we're very proud of and we'd like to see grow. So to Mr. Muller, what do you think it will take from where the issues are today and the struggles we're having to having clear sovereign capabilities on aerospace? What are some of the top two things that you can give to this committee?
So I would maybe bring it back one more step, which is what I mentioned in my opening remarks. And I would agree, Winnipeg is a huge hub for aerospace, a lot of phenomenal companies there doing amazing things. When we look internationally as to how this is done, one, you need that national security strategy to identify what those risks are to the country, to the CAF, and then that industrial strategy needs to then flow from that, identify out some of the capabilities that are required that respond to that threat. One of the pieces that we've been talking to government about for a while is a full index of the capabilities and capacities we do have here in the country. And you need that full understanding of what we have. We have a high-level understanding, but there's so much amazing capacity in this country that I don't think the government even fully recognizes. But if you take a look at aerospace, I mean, I can go through the list. We're leaders in simulation, engines, maintenance, overhaul, production. We're one of the very few countries in the world that can design, build, certify, maintain an aircraft from nose to tail, and it's something we need to preserve throughout that industrial strategy.
And I appreciate how you said that we do really have so much to be proud of in aerospace and generally in the defense space, but it seems like we get gummed up a little bit in procurement and the lack of strategy, which you both outlined. So to you, Ms. Cianfrani, I hope that I said that. Okay, good. Just sort of more generally as an overview, do you see the same issues that aerospace is experiencing as sort of a bottleneck issue, and how does procurement problems that we've seen for a while in government play into that, and how do we solve it? And in 2 minutes, if you could.
I'll do my best. I think first and foremost, we actually have a lot of really good sovereign capability already residing within Canada, and that's kind of like one of the fundamental problems, which is we think that we don't have as much as we really do. I would draw your attention to the fact that we study this sector every couple of years. There is a very, very detailed Statistics Canada in Department of Industry, or ISED, study that goes very detailed into the capabilities that we have in the country, right down to micro data, which may or may not be available to you, but is certainly available to the departments. It is foundational that we procure, since procurement is the biggest lever, that we mindfully decide to procure sovereign capability through our procurement process. I would argue that one of the challenges we have is that our procurement process wants to, by nature, compete many things. We don't often use tools that we have available to us, which are called, generally speaking, national security exceptions or not in the public interest, where you can very expeditiously procure a sovereign capability should you want to. So those would be a couple of things, which is we need to inform ourselves on what's already within the country, and data exists on that. And then secondly, we need to prepare ourselves to procure these things without eroding the base that we already have.
So it sounds like you're both in agreement that we have so much expertise, so much to be proud of. Of course, on the other side, we have incredible armed forces members. So we have everything we need. It just sounds like we don't have this strategy where we're all rowing in the same direction. The government may not even fully recognize the capabilities that we have already. To summarize, is that sort of what you're both saying? We need to recognize what we have and use it strategically. Is that to put it simply?
And the only thing I would go also is define out what the threat is and draw the linkages between the threat and the capabilities that is required here in the country. And I think we've got to be realistic. We're not going to do everything. We're a country of 40 million people, but we can sure do a lot, and we have the capabilities and capacities here, and we need to double down and continue to grow that.
Basically lean into what we're already doing really well, which is a lot of things from what you're both saying. It's just not sort of organized in a way that we could be doing it. I hope I'm saying that. Okay, yeah.
We're not doing that we need to do, and we need to have those discussions.
And you would agree?
Yes.
Yes. And that's, I think, all the time I have, actually. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madame Dancho. Madame O'Rourke, floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair Carr. Thank you very much for being here. We heard a few weeks ago from Associate Deputy Minister that we don't have time for silos because we are not in peacetime. And it was quite jarring to hear that. So there is an urgency, right, to get this defense industrial strategy right, both because of the global context and because of the need to expand our industrial base and supercharge our economy. So can you help me understand what the trade-off is between having a really well fleshed out, Ms. Cianfrani, you fleshed out exactly, we should know all of these things, that we should have basically an organization that oversees it. What's the trade-off between moving quickly or getting all those ducks in a row? How do we build and sail at the same time is my question.
Well, I think first, I don't know whether ADM, I assume it was Hadwin, whether she expressed that they have been working on the defense industrial strategy for almost 12 months now. So I would argue the sense of urgency has been happening for almost over a year, and I would assume, given that there has been many interventions to ask for information, that they would be in a position where they could at least launch some elements of a defense industrial strategy, whether it was, let's call it fully baked or not at this particular point in time. I also think that we have procurements that are already within pipelines for which we have companies that are sovereign and that are supplying goods and services to the Department of National Defense, or that can be put under contract in a very quick period of time. A good example of that would be we have companies that are already are supplying, for example, whether that be ships or whether it be munitions, these are generally recognized as sovereign capabilities, and I don't think we need new contract vehicles to be able to, let's call it, turn on the juice to be able to start preparing ourselves for expediting contracts through vehicles that already are there. So that's one way you could start by, quick hitting many procurements that are in the pipeline, and then looking to the future 10 years, 20 years as to how you would sustain this pipeline for the volume of spending that we're going to get, which, you kind of have to keep queuing it up because the volume is going to be far surpass anything that we've seen in recent history.
Mr. Mueller?
Just one comment on maybe a couple comments on the urgency required. Absolutely, we need to get on with this. One of the things that we've really been calling for a long time is political leadership. We didn't see that under the previous government. Under this government, we see that political leadership, and I think that is sending the signal throughout the bureaucracy that this is something that needs to happen. So that's very much appreciated from all parties across the spectrum on this. We need to get moving. We need to do it. What Kristen had said is absolutely correct. There's certain ones in the pipeline. We need to move on it. But there has to be that cultural shift with engaging early, often with industry, making sure that industry has a voice at the table as these policies are being developed. There's been a flurry of activity, in fairness to the government, throughout the summer on this, but we need formalized input into these types of strategies. And then when the strategy is released, ongoing revision. The world is changing at an increasingly rapid pace. Innovation, technology is also changing at a rapid pace, and that strategy has to evolve and keep up with that. And you have to bring together industry into that conversation.
Okay. Second question is, we are going to have a budget on November the 4th, which is going to fund these essential initiatives. And I'm just wondering if you want to speculate on what the cost of inaction on this file might be. How might an increased reliance on foreign supply or missed innovation opportunities or an immature industrial policy or industrial supply chain impact our opportunities as a country and our development in the coming years? So why the urgency to act now and fund it now for this moment and also in the medium and longer term?
We got 60 seconds for collective response.
Are you going to take it? Or?
I get it. Just aerospace in particular, very long lead times for product development pieces that are happening. So we need the clarity, the certainty as soon as possible. When companies are evaluating investment decisions across the board, that certainty is absolutely required. So the cost of not doing it is the loss of high-paying, the loss of the creation of high-paying, good-paying jobs right across the country, and developing that capacity and capability from a domestic perspective.
I think the cost of not doing it is a little bit different from Mike's. I think we have been signaling on the world stage that we are going to be prepared to meet our 2% of GDP commitment to the rest of the world, and failure to do so would be would result in serious reputational damage to Canada if not already being looked at as a partner that doesn't perhaps put its fair share in.
Okay, merci Madame O'Rourke. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 6 minutes.
Donc, salutations.
I'd like to welcome both of our witnesses. Thank you for being here with us. Are you getting the interpretation? Do you have the interpretation? Yes?
Oui, donc
Okay. Okay, good to see that it's working. I mean, with the new mics, it could be a little finicky. My first question will be to Mr. Mueller, but I'd like to thank both of you for being with us today and for all the information that you are providing us with. Mr. Mueller, before we start talking about defense and the aerospace industry, I'd like to come back on the luxury tax that applies to aircrafts. Is this still an issue that is a worry for your industry? And at what point are we when it comes to this tax, which has been weighing down on the industry?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Talked about the budget, so I have hope that the upcoming budget will address this. But it is of serious concern to the industry right now. And in my opening remarks, I talked about the interplay between defense and the civil side. And right now we have government policy that is a job-killing tax on our industry that we are seeing significant impacts. We've lost over $2 billion in revenue for the business aircraft industry. We've done some independent analysis. This is impacting over 6,000 jobs right across the country, a vast majority of that throughout the supply chain. When you take a look at the lost revenue that is there, we've lost $90 million in GST, $90 million in income tax. The government has only collected approximately $15 million off of aircraft, and it costs CRA $14 million to administer this program. It absolutely makes no sense when we're all very attuned to increasing taxes and tariffs and all sorts of things across the board, to have our own government putting in place a job-killing tax on our industry. We're talking about the good-paying jobs that the defense side brings, but on the civil side, it's absolutely devastating to certain portions of the industry. So if we want a strong aerospace economy, we need to take a look at the defense side, which is what we're doing, but the government also needs to take a look at some of the taxation measures, the punitive taxation measures that are currently in place, impacting workers right across the country. So huge concern for us, something that we'll be very closely watching in the upcoming budget. And we're very hopeful that the government will see the errors of their ways and correct some of that taxation issues.
oui, merci beaucoup. En effet, souhaitons que la nouvelle
Thank you very much. So the new government and the new prime minister have been working on this issue, but as you're saying, the numbers speak for themselves, and the government is depriving itself of revenue, of income, compared to what they are bringing in by imposing this tax on the industry. So let's hope that the government reviews this approach.
When I met with the Minister of Finance, I said, I have a proposal for you to bring in over $150 million in revenue. Get rid of the luxury tax. You're only bringing in $15 million, but the lost sales alone will generate $150 million. So usually when we talk about budgets, it's always asking, but here's a common sense solution that would generate some revenue for the government. So
c'est bien entendu. Merci.
Thank you. That's well taken note of. And of course, there are thousands of jobs that are lost because of this tax. Now, let's come back to the defense industries. Now, for you, a defense industrial strategy is absolutely necessary in order to reinforce the defense industrial base. Do you think that this should be considered as part of an aerospace industrial industry that is larger and more global? Thank you for the question.
we've long been advocating for an aerospace industrial strategy. Very pleased that the government, and it seems as though there's support from all parties for a defense industrial strategy. But much like the luxury tax that impacts the industry, the need for an aerospace industrial strategy is also critical. When you take a look at innovation, when you take a look at the labor market, when you take a look at the interplay between the defense and civil side specific to aerospace, absolutely critical that we maintain both sides of that dynamic for our industry. And when you take a look at innovation, we have significant funds flowing through on innovation to the industry for certain projects. We need the government, again, to be the first buyer of that innovation. And then with aerospace, 90% of what we do is export related. And so there's a huge component both on the civil and the defense side to generate contributions to Canada's GDP with respect to that export piece. So civil and defense side, huge export opportunities if we can get these strategies right.
OK, merci. Donc, c'est ça.
Thank you. So the defense industry and the civilian industries, these two need to be doing well for the global industry to be doing well, so they complement each other. I have other questions as well. You talked about the need for a change of culture in the industrial realm. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, if you could elaborate maybe on that point.
Culture is absolutely needed, and I will give credit to the Prime Minister and his announcement on the Defense Investment Agency. The third part of that announcement was identifying the need for that cultural shift. So how can industry help the government with respect to some of these procurements, have earlier ongoing engagement to make sure that we're shortening down these procurement timelines? Absolutely critical.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie. Ms. Borelli, 5 minutes.
Is for Mr. Mueller. Oh, did I? Okay. Mr. Mueller, as head of AIAC, you represent the aerospace firms that will be asked to deliver much of the hardware, systems, and dual-use technology behind any Canadian defense modernization. In my riding of Tecumseh, Windsor, Ontario, we have a lot of precision manufacturers, and we have some aerospace suppliers as well, even though they all face trade and workforce pressures. What concrete procurement and industrial policy reforms should the government adopt immediately to ensure announced defense spending translates into sustained jobs for small and medium enterprises?
Well, thank you for the question, and I would agree with you. There's world-class machine shops, world-class manufacturers right across the country, and I've had the opportunity to visit quite a few of them, and in the most unexpected places also, creating good-paying jobs right across the country. The number one piece, and we've been saying this for probably 5 or 6 years, is that industrial strategy. So the number one thing the government can do is put in place an industrial strategy to formalize out where the government is going with respect to some of these procurements, and painting that picture as to how that then flows through the different supply chains. And it's got to be the full life cycle of this. You got to take a look at the innovation side. The government has some pretty serious commitments with respect to innovation funding. Borealis, not a lot of details coming out of that. That has to be formalized. Then first buyer for a lot of these pieces that the government is then funding, and then again exporting. The other piece of critical importance is the labor market side of things. If we don't have that pipeline of highly skilled workers, we have companies right now that are giving away contracts because we don't have that highly skilled pipeline within the country. So we always talk about aerospace being an ecosystem, and that strategy has to address all those different parts of that ecosystem.
I was going to ask you another question, but you just said something that piqued my interest in regards to having enough skilled labor. Can't we speed up making that happen? I mean, we have colleges and universities that would love to put more butts in their seats and would love to be involved in this strategy and in getting our defense system up and running better. What can be done to speed that up?
Part of the challenge is at the provincial level, to be frank, we have a lot of companies.
Mr. Mueller, you just got to push the button on the microphone. It should automatically illuminate, but look for it to be red. There you go. If you just want to start again, because that's how our translation functions. Thank you.
I would agree with you. The labor market side is absolutely critical, and we have many companies creating their own training programs to make sure that it's relevant and responsive to industry. So when we talk about that cultural shift on the defense side, I think that has to come at the educational institution side also, and that is starting to happen, which is very good. A lot of that responsibility, again, rests at the provincial level, so we're doing quite a bit of work at that level also.
Okay. Do I have time for another question?
Kathy?
1 minute, okay. For Christina, please. Tens of thousands of Canadians are employed in the industry, and industry invests heavily in R&D. Yet many small and medium enterprises across Windsor, across Ontario, across Canada, I believe, are worried about being shut out of major defense procurements. So what policy reforms can help solve that problem?
So thank you for the question. It's a very good one. Our typical policies in general are generally compete largely everything. So in the case of small companies with unique technologies that are selling directly to the federal government, I would argue that we should potentially even be skipping a competitive process with foreign entities, perhaps by signaling that certain capabilities you want within your country, you can limit it to Canadian-only companies, which we don't do very often. The second thing is we have largely passive policies with respect to when we deal with foreign OEMs, which are largely the platform providers. So if you look in the case of the aerospace side, most of the platform providers, platform being aircraft, are foreign, even if they do have a small Canadian component to them. So these smaller Canadian companies are in those supply chains. And what you need to do is be far more interventionalist as to how you want those foreign primes to pick up smaller Canadian suppliers within their supply chains. But you need to do that a lot further up front, because when you purchase something off the shelf, largely a foreign prime contractor is not incentivized to change over their entire supply chain for the low volumes that we do in Canada. We have some tools that could be used. The industrial technological benefits policy is one of them to try and stimulate getting small businesses in foreign supply chains, but it's largely, like I said, passive. It's not done far enough up front in the development stages to push Canadian firms within the supply chains of these foreign OEMs when they're actually building the aircraft.
It's 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. And Mr. Mueller, great to see you here. I know I had the opportunity to discuss a lot of this in Abbotsford in British Columbia during the air show. I had the opportunity to meet with House representatives in the Pacific Northwest, respective regions that, with our neighbors down south, and having our defense system so interconnected, we talked a lot about how many of the suppliers come from Canada. In your opening remarks, you talked about how we can manufacture in the aerospace sector tail to nose, and I have some experience in there. Many years ago, I used to work on aircraft. But if you can tell us, like, with respect to the suppliers and the capacity of our suppliers here, how we can do that sovereignly in Canada, if you.
Well, it's great to see you again, and I appreciate your support always at the air show and the industry event we do in British Columbia. And British Columbia is a great example of an aerospace cluster, much like I got to go across the country, like Manitoba, Ontario, and Montreal. Capacity is there. Industry needs certainty. And certainty comes through this defense industrial strategy from the government. Right now, and we've been saying this for quite a long time, we're in a process of transactional approach with respect to defense procurement. That strategy will outline where the government is going, give the industry certainty, give those large primes the certainty on how to invest, how to develop that supply chain within the country. And so absolutely critical to have that industrial strategy in place. sooner rather than later, and again, bring the industry into that conversation.
And maybe same question to you, Ms. Cianfrani. And maybe if you can add to a little bit more about specifically the steps that maybe we can take with respect to incentivizing maybe our suppliers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we have shied away from, to Mike's point about we operate very transactionally, we look at everything from a procurement by procurement basis, which means that you don't get these very large economies of scale, and you also don't get business capital being invested because the buying is too small and it's lumpy. So if you want a very large prime, whether that's Canadian or even foreign owned, to start integrating parts and components or sensors from your own supply chains, you have to be doing that much farther up front, and you have to have a relationship which is going to guarantee them that they're going to guarantee that they're going to get their return on investment from you over time. It's a little bit like flipping our mind around from doing buy by buy to a more longer term strategy where you have a partnership with a particular company that you know is going to evolve a product over time. Think about, like, I don't know, your Microsoft Office, and the next generation is coming. So if you build partnerships with that, with either foreign OEMs, or I would argue really good ones are like we've done in our national shipbuilding, you can start looking 20, 30, 40 years down the road, and then you have more leverage to say to those firms, can you please integrate my Canadian technology within that very large and sort of guaranteed, if you will, longer-term investment plan.
Just building on that, actually, if like, how can we ensure that Canadian SMEs and startups in the defense and national, security sector remain a focus of national procurement strategy and not get sidelined by a larger multinational firm?
One of the ways you can do that is being far more, like I said, interventionalist than we are currently right now. The tools we use are passive. They require other companies to choose where they invest. Using a defense industrial strategy, you would call out specifically areas of interest where you wanted foreign primes. For example, you would say, I don't know, this particular sensor or this particular capability will be Canadian, and our expectation when we're doing the contract is that you will embed this Canadian technology in our variant. And if you start to be like that, like heavily interventionalist, which in general we are not, because we have such low volumes and it's always in any given moment in time. If we change our thinking around, I truly do think there will be more opportunities for small businesses to enter in these supply chains. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Oui. Mr. Saint-Marie, 2.5 minutes. Thank you. The question will be for both of our witnesses a minute each, if possible, now in connection with an issue raised by my colleague, Mr. Baines, and you referred to it as well. But I'd like to ask you about the impacts of the procurement deadlines on your capacity of investing in innovation and improvement of labor. A minute each, if you can.
I'll go first. So one of the challenges is that innovation can come from any company, any kind of company, but there is a lot of innovation that comes out of small to medium-sized enterprises. One of the single biggest problems that we see with the procurement cycles that we currently have and the inability to procure immediately Canadian sovereign capability is that the procurement cycle being anywhere between 5, 10, or 15 years will basically cash flow out small businesses, so they cannot retain the skills or even sometimes the services, the service provider, the individual who has the knowledge, they cannot retain it for such a long period of time. So basically we get what's typically called a valley of death, where the innovation is funded, there's no procurement vehicle, or the procurement vehicle happens 5 years later, and effectively the firm runs out of cash, or it has to look for other ways in which it can keep itself and its people alive.
So maybe just to build on that, predictability, having the government come forward with their expectations earlier provides that certainty. I think as part of this, especially for small businesses, government needs to take a look at those payment schedules. How do you pay in a timely manner? How do you pay maybe ahead of schedule? A huge area of opportunity is on the innovation side. We have this Borealis, we have these commitments. How do we make sure that small, medium-sized businesses can take advantage of some of these pieces? How do you take a look at some of the policies that keep these small businesses from scaling up and growing, building out that ecosystem that's there? Some small businesses are fine to say small, some have ambitions, and we need to have policy that enables them to grow and create more jobs and build more of that ecosystem.
Parfait, merci. Mr. Guglielmin, 5 minutes.
Thank you both for being here. Ms. Chen-Ferrani, in your opening remarks, you stressed the importance for very meaningful industry participation in industrial defense strategy. And you also kind of alluded to that really this got underway about 12 months ago. In your opinion, since the government's announcement of defense industrial strategy, how much engagement from the industry has been solicited?
Yeah. So there has been, I think it's fair to say, a lot of disparate engagement. The challenge is that I'll use my cake analogy. It's, thousands of interventions to companies across the country, and I would ask you, what do you want in your cake? And you say, I think it needs eggs, flour, sugar, and some sprinkles. And I say, I think it needs to be chocolate, eggs, flour, and maybe, I don't know, something else. And in the end, I don't know whether we're baking a pancake, an actual cake, or a multi-layered cake. And I think in the end, we know that different facets of industry will have different opinions, but that it all has to come together holistically to make sense. And that is what we are trying to express, is that the component pieces, I believe, have been conveyed, but we cannot now see what does that make from a holistic, joined up strategy that will get us, because it is effectively industry that has to deliver, that will get us from where we are today to be able to absorb within our companies roughly, I mean, I'm not assuming that we're going to be eating all the money that's coming from the government, but $150 billion worth of investment compared to the amounts that we've seen in the last 10 years.
So when we think traditionally about how this has worked, the unwillingness to collaborate in this manner that you're explaining with the defense industry, has that led our defense firm or hindered our procurement efficiency or innovation in the defense industry specifically?
I don't know if it's hindered necessarily innovation, but we have a big distinction. I call it the separation between church and state, where we are very afraid and tepid in this country to unabashedly procure in the shortest frame possible resident Canadian capability. We think in some way that is something cruel and unusual or inside baseball or not fair, and we're not giving other countries an opportunity to bid on our procurements. And the reality is this is a managed market. This market is heavily protected and managed around the world. In some countries, you are specifically told who you are going to work with and what you are going to build. And I'm not saying that we necessarily have to get that far, but we need to understand that this is a moment when our failure to be a lot more directive about what we want and what our expectations are and what we intend to buy for ourselves from our own country can effectively squander this high volume of investment money that we will have.
So the PBO noted $12 billion in lapsed defense spending between 2017 and 2018 and 2022 and 2023. Which factors would you say most contribute to that lapse in defense spending, and what risk would that pose as our defense budget necessarily increases?
In some cases, procurements do move to the right? You're negotiating, but I would argue for the most part, we see that procurements get stuck in a couple of phases. One is the actual procurement to contract phase, it can take years, and the first happens a lot more upfront. We call it requirements definition and options analysis, and it can take 5 years before it gets out of options analysis. And one of the contributing factors for that, which you would have to validate this with the Canadian Armed Forces, which is they are the owners of the requirements and options analysis part of the process, is I believe the changeover in posting cycles with individuals that come in and out of the procurement process. So perhaps if we civilianized that a little bit more, got it stable, and actually set some targets and mapped out the process, we might be able to reduce bottlenecks and other inefficiencies in the process, as well as perhaps have stable individuals that are there year over year, which would allow a more efficient process.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Gugelin. Ms. Akan, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mueller, you mentioned the long lead time in product development. So how prepared are our Canadian SMEs to engage in partnerships, such as with countries that have field-proven or mission-proven systems, in order to attract investments and strengthen Canada's defense industrial base? And how can private capital be utilized in this sector better, with the largest buyer of the defense industry being the public sector? How can private sector funding and investments be made to strengthen the industry as a whole?
Well, maybe I'll take that in reverse because it's a great question. Private sector investment will follow government leadership, and that's incredibly important. So we've long talked about the need for political leadership, and I would say, if we want to talk about delays, we needed that political leadership. I feel we do have that political leadership now, so we need to move forward on that and that consensus amongst all parties with respect to this. It's interesting, I was at an international group of industry leaders, and they're paying attention to Canada, and they are now seeing the commitment and the profile that is being given to defense, and international companies are looking at how they can invest in Canada because of what's happening. They don't know where to go or how to do it, but it's on their radar, and so they are looking for that defense industrial strategy, so it's absolutely critical. When you take a look at the small, medium-sized businesses, we are truly in aerospace specifically, it is a global supply chain. So our small, medium-sized businesses, they're no strangers of that international supply chain. So again, the predictability that's going to come with a defense industrial strategy will spur on that private sector investment, will spur on those opportunities for the supply chain. When you take a look at, if we take a look at some of the impacts and benefits to the supply chains from some of these major procurements, it's 60-70% go through the supply chain. So absolutely critical for those small, medium-sized businesses right across the country.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mueller, you also mentioned that the shortage of skilled labor, and we all know that defense industry is a very skill-oriented labor. So our government has pledged to invest in training programs, skilled trade apprenticeship, and also retraining support for workers in key industries. Do you see these investments as value for the strengthening Canada's sovereign industrial capability?
So in a short answer, yes. Any investment going into the labor market is much needed. I would say more, but also being strategic about it, working with the provinces to make sure that the funding is going to the best places, responding to industry needs as opposed to trying to fill seats is absolutely critical. So again, that cultural shift where we need to see that we're starting to see on the defense side, we need to see that on the educational side also, and it is coming. It is a work in progress.
Do I have time? Are there any particular areas where Canada is closer to achieving industrial self-sufficiency, especially when it comes to defense industry?
I would say it's a case-by-case basis, but again, we're one of the few countries that can design, certify, and build an aircraft from nose to tail. So again, the certainty, but you may have.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I certainly think that we have, so we're going to be receiving a lot of assets that have a significant amount of data. Managing that data, having data sovereignty, having some of the things that we have in the Waterloo or the technology corridors here in Ottawa, like artificial intelligence, which will parse through that data. I think Canada has that capability. We do have the capability, I believe, to do our own cryptography, and we have the quantum computing capability that will allow us for the next generation of encryption. And, we spent about 10 years rebuilding the shipbuilding sector, so I do think we should be thinking about the next 10 or 20 years, because that is a sector that is now operational. And lastly, our intelligence services rely on satellite information, and our population is soon going to be, or could rely on low Earth orbiting satellites, which are made here in Canada. So I think we should be declaring space and cyber deterrence and intelligence gathering capabilities as sovereign capabilities. And that's just a fraction of the many wonderful things we have here in Canada.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Colleagues, that's all the time we've got for our first hour. I'd like to thank our witnesses very much for availing themselves to the committee. Appreciate your insight and guidance on this important study. Colleagues, we'll suspend briefly as we turn over to the next round.